Hi all, thanks for joining. While you get settled in and connect your audio, get yourself a cup of coffee. If you could just share your name and your role and your city in the chat. We'd love when we get to the Q&A portion to make it as interactive as possible. We'll give everyone a minute or two to connect. Right, we see Memphis on, see Ohio, La Cruces, Gastonia. Great. It's 2 o'clock and we know you all have busy calendars. So we're going to get started and then we know some people will join us late and we'll make sure that they all get caught up. So continue if you just joined, if you could add your name and your role in your city to the chat, that will help us make this a really interactive session. So today's session of the Federal Assistance E311 program is really all about helping communities with their state and local fiscal recovery funds make sure that they've reported how they're using the money, how they've obligated it, and so that every penny that was sent to respond to COVID and to build back better stays in your communities. And so we really set up this session out of hearing from the folks at the U.S. Department of Treasury that there have been a lot of irregularities in how people have done their reporting, common errors that are happening, and that there's a level of concern about how that might impact community's ability to keep this money. And so today is meant to respond to any questions that you all are having, whether that's about reports that you've already submitted and you're getting emails from Treasury saying, alert, alert, please fix this, or you're trying to deal with reobligating funds or some other technical issue that happens after the December 31st deadline to obligate funds. So we've made today a really we front loaded it with the information that we're hearing are the most common issues and some advice, but then we've left a lot of time in the back end for you to be able to engage and with our experts and ask them about your questions. We're also going to be throwing up a poll later. If today's session isn't enough and you need more help figuring out how to make sure that you've properly spent and obligated your funds and reported back on them, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll make sure that you get some one-on-one support. So without further ado, I want to toss it over to our expert who has been supporting this joint initiative between Bloomberg Philanthropies and the U.S. Conference of Mayors to help cities. Matt Hansen at Wood O'Brien's has been sort of one of our steadfast experts, and his colleague Ryan Vergara, also at WIT. They'll be answering your questions and giving you their best information about what they're hearing and what they're seeing out in the field. So without further ado, Matt, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jamie, and I appreciate folks carving out some time this afternoon. We realized that it would probably be a fairly small audience as Treasury is also hosting, several help sessions each day. But we wanted to, as Jamie was speaking to, create kind of a safe space for people to ask questions that maybe you didn't feel comfortable, talking to Treasury about, or just, learning from your fellow peers on the call. So looking forward to a real open, dynamic conversation at the end. Next slide. Just a quick agenda today. Treasury was not able to join us, but they did provide some information about what their overall process is, and we'll walk through that. There has been some misinformation out in the field about, when hard deadlines are for the portal and for some other correction activities going forward. Sharing some of the common reporting compliance issues we're hearing. There's a slide with additional resources, and then really open it up for Q&A. So The initial compliance timeline. So where we are right now, post April 30th reporting, Treasury allows 1 full month before issuing a formal notice of noncompliance. Now, I know lots of people have been receiving emails from Treasury. These are preliminary notices or reminders. These are not the formal notice of noncompliance. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take them seriously, but they're not quite the, end all be all. If you don't act now, you're going to have to pay back all your money. But so 1 month before issuing a formal notice of noncompliance, what they have been doing is sending out these reminders. So a reminder went out immediately, the next day on May 1st for non-reporters. Another reminder went out on May 7th, a third reminder on the 14th. From a Treasury perspective, their hope is that each reminder helps bring folks into compliance so they don't get to a notice of noncompliance. They try to provide additional help resources. That's why they're also holding additional training sessions to help. Calls begin after the second reminder, and that's usually what we're seeing and hearing is the wake up call. Widow Brian's has gotten a bunch of notifications from clients saying, "Oh my Lord, what's going on? I just got a call from Treasury." It really seems to be the wake up call that many have received. Treasury, as you all know, is down to a relative skeleton crew when it comes to the Office of Recovery Programs. So their focus really is on the larger allocations, the larger recipients, working backwards, um, which is understandable, except what we're really hearing as far as non-compliance and organizations having issues are the smaller ones. So unfortunately, those two worlds are going to collide at some point. Um, they strongly encourage anybody looking for treasury or for assistance to start with their inbox. They're trying to track everything, give them case numbers, make sure that if a problem takes several weeks for resolution, that they have documentation and somebody doesn't inadvertently get a non-compliance notice when they've been actively working with them. So if you have a question, if you have a concern, your first step really should be reaching out to the Treasury inbox, getting that case number assigned, and then it'll, no matter how long it takes to get resolution, you're sort of in good standing. Next slide. So notice of non-compliance timeline, formal initial notices went out on May 21st. So the notices that went out on May 21st, which was just yesterday, they actually sent some notices earlier this week as well about program income and obligations. Uh, these notices give you, 5 additional business days to come into compliance. Um, Again, if technical assistance was requested and you got that case number, no notice was sent. And the final deadline before enforcement actions will come out on May 28th. And really, by the time you get to that final enforcement action, your first step, if you receive one of those, should immediately be reach out to the inbox, get a case number, get yourself into that technical assistance cycle, protective umbrella as you work through whatever outstanding issue you're having. But that's the problem, or that's the process that we're going through right now. Some of the notices that came out previously, either late last week or this week, talked about a May 23rd deadline. And a lot of people thought that was like the deadline. That was the, part of that 5-day come into compliance. The reporting portal will remain open until the end of June, until such a time as they close it to reset it for the July reporting. So there is some wiggle room, but really encourage folks to make any corrections, get into compliance, or reach out to Treasury and formally request TA as soon as possible. Um, Recipients can submit reports at any time. Right now, they can unsubmit, correct, resubmit. Um, if you're going through that process where sort of you still need to submit or you need to unsubmit and resubmit, I really encourage everybody, just as a safety point of view or a risk mitigation point of view, to also be reaching out to Treasury's inbox, getting that case number assigned, documenting that to demonstrate that you are willing to and actively working with Treasury to come into compliance. That's the most important thing right now. And then also, take advantage of the webinars that they're putting on as well. Next slide. So what are we hearing right now as far as common reporting compliance issues? Um, uh, Believe it or not, we're hearing that many people are not fully obligating their funds on their reports. That was really the major push for uh, the July 31st report for quarterly reporters and the 430 report for annual reporters, was to demonstrate that you had fully obligated your funds. Treasury is seeing a lot of uh, unobligated balances remaining. These most likely are just reporting mistakes. They've started to send notices to people that have not fully obligated funds. We're also seeing sort of this weird trend of folks submitting zero obligated reports. Again, probably just not understanding the process. But if you fall into one of these two camps, definitely reach out for technical assistance and get those corrected as quickly as possible, because that's really where Treasury's focus on recoupment is going to be, on those entities they believe have not fully obligated their funds. Uh, Program income reporting errors. So this is an interesting one when it comes to the state and local fiscal recovery, because program income is not consistently dealt with across all of the money. So first of all, you have interest that you've earned, interest that's accrued on the balances for state and local fiscal recovery fund. As you all know, this money was, it distributed upfront to you in two tranches. Many of you have been sitting on the money for quite some time and have accrued large interest balances. That is not program income. For those of you that are using your money with revenue loss, either all of it in revenue loss or a percentage of revenue loss, any income you derive or your subrecipients derive under revenue loss does not count as program income either. But any of the projects you're doing under the traditional expenditure categories that derive program income has to be treated as such, sort of consistent with the uniform guidance, which means you have to increase the overall award amount to offset the program income, and then use it for allowable activities obligated by such and such a date, expended by such and such a date. So um, Treasury seeing quite a bit of errors there, where people are recording program income, but then they're not increasing the obligations to match the program income, et cetera. So really take a hard look at that. Make sure that you're not reporting interest. Make sure you're not reporting program income earned under revenue loss projects, and that what you're reporting is truly program income under state and local fiscal recovery fund. The third bullet makes me hurt, and it's non-reporting. Prior to the April 30th reporting deadline, Treasury had circulated a report to the states of non-compliant, non-reporting entities, and it was pretty good news. It was a relatively modest number. And many of the states had done a lot of outreach to help bring additional people into compliance. These are very small NEUs without capacity or had turnover at their organization. After the April 30th reporting, that number has increased exponentially. I mean, gone from dozens in a particular state to hundreds in a particular state, which is really sort of discouraging based on how much outreach and support was given. Um, the the common thinking is that these were folks that, were expended the money very early on. They expended the money in 22, 23, figured they didn't have to report anymore because they had expended fully the money. But as we've discussed on these calls previously, uh, there is no final report functionality as of yet, and there is no, closeout functionality as of yet. It's in the Treasury portal. Treasury is using it for certain programs, but they're not using it for state and local fiscal recovery funds. So until we get word otherwise, to stay in compliance, even if you fully obligated, fully expended the money, you have to keep reporting on this, even if it's a zero report, no changes, no activity. Um, you still have to go through that. And we're hoping that message gets out and many of these NEUs can rectify the situation so they stay in compliance with the grant. And then finally, I can only think these are, folks running into technical glitches where they've reached out to the help desk to get a ticket. They've been frustrated with the error messages they're getting that they can't get them cleared in order to, complete and certify the report. Or it's a situation where you have multiple people from an organization working on the report. One person compiles the report, the other person certifies it and submits it, and there's just a communication breakdown between the two. But Treasury is seeing more than a few where the reports are essentially complete. All the data's in there. It should be good to go. But for whatever reason, the entity did not certify it and submit it. So just, make sure you go back and double check that it's not just completed, but it's fully certified and submitted to make sure you get credit for all the hard work you've done. This is a list of resources that Treasury routinely makes available. The one thing I'd sort of call out is the updated compliance and reporting guidance. As you all may recall, this one came out very, very late in the game this cycle. So if you haven't reviewed the reporting and compliance guidance update for the April report, please take a look at it. There are some language changes in there about how you report on DEIA projects and some other things, but that came out very late in the game, and you might have submitted your report prior to that actually being released by Treasury. And with that, I know folks have been adding some questions, but we'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. And one of the things I put in the chat was just the Treasury email address and what they're asking for you to include if you're submitting a ticket. What we've heard is basically by doing that, you're almost stopping the clock a bit, right? You're putting them in the driver's seat to respond to you and showing that you're doing your best to be in compliance. And so it's a really important step, as Matt said, to make sure that you do that if you're working through an issue, that you reach out to Treasury, you sort of log your issue. They will get back to you. It might take a while because of, as Matt said, the workforce reductions have really hit them hard. But you are helping your community and protecting it from looking as if you're not taking action. We're also going to put in the chat links to those resources that Matt just shared. And we're also going to have those on our program website. We'll share the link to that. So with that, I'm going to jump into the questions we've received so far. Just big plug to put your questions in. If you're on here and you have a question, please let us know. So we got a question from Fort Collins that asked us, in some cases, we cannot enter obligations due to issues with the portal. As long as we have those obligations documented, are we okay? Ryan, I think you took a crack at this one.
Yeah, I would say that's certainly an important step to ensure that you have documentation to prove that you are in compliance with the obligation deadline. But you're really going to want to make sure that within the portal itself, especially within the project overview tab where there's a total obligations calculation and a field that says remaining funding that will be lost if not obligated, you really want to make sure that your obligations in the portal are accurate, because that's the field that Treasury is going to be using to determine whether or not they believe that funds should be returned to them based upon what you've reported in the portal. So if there's a discrepancy between what you've truly obligated and what you're seeing in the portal, you're going to want to make your best effort to ensure that that value is updated. And as Matt said, if you've already submitted your report for the April deadline, if that's the case where you're seeing an obligation level that's lower than what you know is reflective of what you've achieved, I would certainly unsubmit your report and try to get that value to be accurate, so Treasury isn't thinking that you haven't obligated those funds and will be expecting you to return them when you've already obligated or potentially expended them as well.
You don't want to get into the situation where you're having to defend your compliance with the obligation standard. So, Treasury, I mean, bottom line, yes, there's a documentation standard and a reporting standard. And if you documented the obligation by 12/31/24, ultimately you're going to be fine. You're going to have a lot of headaches to work through, if from a reporting perspective, you wind up on their list as being non-compliant. So, strongly encourage you to, get the report to show fully obligated so you don't have to deal with all those other steps, defending that you've met the obligation requirement.
And Joanne, thanks for your message in the chat. Sounds like you guys are in good shape. I expect nothing less. Great. Our next questions were from Boston, Massachusetts. When reporting staff pay that has been obligated via interagency agreements, should we create an expenditure against the award or draw down the award and report the expenditure as payment to individuals?
Maybe if you guys want to jump in and further explain this question, I was a little bit confused by the wording, but in general, for parts of government that are receiving their funds or were obligated by the interagency agreement, the obligations and expenditures will be reflected in the expenditure amount section based upon the amount. So whether it's greater than 50K or a less than 50K obligation for the IAA, that will be kind of the breakout for how you're reporting them in the portal. But I'm not sure if there's additional nuance to that question that you might want to explain.
Yeah, so it's just about so a lot of these interagencies are to obligate for staff time to get us through 2026. And in the past, staff time would go in payments to individuals down the bottom there, but that doesn't go against any award. So I'm wondering if when we report, if we need to draw down those awards and put them in as payments to individuals, or if they would just go against those awards, which is payments over 50K.
You can report them underneath the holistic interagency agreement. So you don't need to break them out separately like you had been doing before you created the IAAs. You can just report those expenditures against the IAA as a whole.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And next question from Boston, building on this, can a replacement contract be an interagency MOU?
There's a lot of nuance that's involved with talking about replacement contracts and changing your obligations after the obligation deadline. And so my response would be potentially, like, there's nothing, blanket preventing that from occurring, but you'll certainly want to make sure that you're maintaining compliance with the obligation IFR and specifically FAQs. And I can put a link in the chat to the SLFRF FAQ document 17.17 and 17.19. Those go over in broad terms, the requirements related to making adjustments to your obligations post 12/31/24.
And the purpose of the replacement contract methodology is to enter into a new contract that didn't exist at the time, 12/31/24, and there's very specific criteria when you can do that. If you had an interagency MOU that existed that met the obligation deadline, then certainly any money that comes back from a contract that's canceled, lowered, whatever, can be applied to, an obligation that happened before 12/31/24. So just be cautious about, when you're trying to utilize the replacement contract language, because that puts you down a specific pathway where you have to meet these other criteria in order to use it.
Great, thank you guys. The next is a question from the Greenfield Township Fire Department. We have a new fiscal officer and we need to help her set up and identify what still needs to be entered into the portal. What's the best way to get started in that process?
So there's a couple of resources out there. I put one in the chat just now that Treasury has, and I think they also have some couple YouTube video walkthroughs. But the first step would be having your new fiscal officer register in login.gov, and then your account administrator, hopefully they still have access to the portal. They would be able to add that individual after they created their login.gov account and assign them a role in the portal, which is also outlined in that PDF document I linked. And I saw that the other part of that question was you would like help identifying what still needs to be entered into the portal as well. So we'd be more than happy to walk through that with you too, if after you get your fiscal officer in there, if you're still stuck or unable to submit your report, we could help walk you through.
And I would just add, given that we're 3 weeks into May in kind of this preliminary non-compliance period, I would encourage you to contact the Treasury Help Desk, get that case number assigned, just to give yourself a little bit extra wiggle room as you work through these various steps.
And what we've heard from folks is that the portals are not necessarily the most user-friendly or intuitive. So the process of transferring or adding people to accounts is not an easy one. You're not the only ones who are having trouble with that. So as Matt said, as you work to establish that login, I'm just going to put it in here again. Make sure that you send that email and get a ticket started, even if you eventually can sort of work it out. It will alert them that you're trying. The next question was from Spencerville, Ohio. The original allocation amount is misreported. I cannot find where I'm able to edit it. Is able to help them out?
Yep. In the user guide, I put a link into the chat just now. It's on pages 14 and 15 if you're going by the page numbers in the bottom right-hand corner of each page, but it's within the recipient profile tab once you're in the report for this period. And then on the right-hand side, underneath the record details, you should see an unsubmit button that would allow you to edit the data that you've reported and make any updates.
Awesome. I'm about to get to our last question that's been submitted so far. So if you are on and you still have a question, we'll just open it up and people can either raise their hands or put it in the chat. But we're here for you. And so if there's anything we can do, please do let us know. So the next question is from Bowie, Texas. I completed my report and I have not heard from Treasury. Are we finished with reporting now?
It's definitely a good sign that you've not heard from Treasury. I will just caution that and say they might have a different contact person on file, so there could be communications going to somebody else in your organization, not necessarily to you. One of the things we really recommend is once you've certified and submitted your report, download a copy of that report, take a print screen of the system. But you won't necessarily hear from Treasury saying, your report has been, received, approved. You won't get that sort of feedback. So the fact that you're not getting reminders or preliminary non-compliance messages is great. Are you finished with reporting now? No. Like I said, there's no final report. There's no closeout process as of yet. So if you're a quarterly reporter, be prepared to report July 31st, even if there's no, activity. And if you're an annual reporter, as of right now, you'll be looking at, April of next year having to report. So make a note, a reminder for yourself, set up a tickler. But as of right now, there is nobody who's actually done with reporting because there's no final report or closeout process.
Great. And we got a question from our friend Joanne from Fort Collins. For programs paid for with revenue loss funds, the portal didn't accept any IAAs or other forms of obligation. We have those agreements all signed before 12/31/24, but it makes me uneasy that we couldn't put anything in the portal to prove that obligation. Should I just not worry about it?
That was the administrative easy button that was reporting under revenue loss 6.1, 6.2, that it doesn't take that next level. Uh, so, make sure you have them on file, make sure you have them in your records, but yeah, you're in the same boat with lots of people under revenue loss. It was just lump sum obligations, expenditures, and no detail below that.
I just maybe underline or double click what Matt said. Memos to file are really annoying to do, but memories are also short and there's turnover. And so the more you can document the process, even, just train of thought, the better your city will be prepared. And if, 2 years down the line, someone comes calling and asks what happened with this.
And there's nothing that prevents you from entering multiple 6.1 projects. So if it makes you feel better to, have 6.1 revenue loss, IAA X, 6.1 revenue loss, IAA, and memorialize it that way, you certainly can. But there's no need to. You can just have one single project that encompasses all of revenue loss.
Great. Any final questions? While everyone thinks for a second, we're gonna launch a poll. With our second question in the poll, if you answer yes, I still need further help. You're gonna get some outreach from us that offers assistance, figuring out what that looks like, what are the issues that you need help with, who can we connect you with. And so if you feel like you need that, please do let us know. Don't be shy to indicate that. That's why we're here. And we want to make sure, as I said at the top, that your communities keep this money. We know that so many have put it to work towards really important programs and services. And we want to make sure that you're not then being forced to send that back. If there's, and then any last pearls of wisdom, Matt and Ryan?
I'm just going to impose on the participants in today's webinar. I know many of the participants are medium and larger jurisdictions that had probably, have teams that work on this or, knock this out pretty easily. Many of the smaller jurisdictions that are surrounding you are still struggling. So if you have the opportunity to reach out to some of your peers, either through, the local, League of Cities or just through your own networks, to check on, especially the small non-entitlement units, to see how they're doing and if they need any support. That number of non-compliant NEUs going up the way it did after the April reporting really concerns me. So anything you all can do within your sphere of influence would definitely be helpful.
I'll just remind you, you don't have to be the ones to actually provide the help. Just figure out that they need it, and then you can, shuffle them off to us, and we'll catch the ball.
Yeah.
Great. And with that, we're gonna close out today's session. Thank you so much for attending. As we get to as we get to the next step in the process, as Matt said, we're not we're not quite done yet. We'll also, continue putting out resources or have webinars if we think there's value to add, or that there's particular issues that cities are struggling with. So don't be shy in reaching out to us. And with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.